Okay, good evening and welcome to this evening's Solidarity with Sudan webinar. Really pleased to welcome all of you to this meeting organised by Liberation, Stop the War and the Morning Star, Solidarity with the People of Sudan, End the Proxy War for Peace, Social Justice and Democracy. My name's Gawain. I'm General Secretary of the General Federation of Trade Unions, and I'm very pleased to have been asked by Liberation to chair this evening's meeting. We've got a fantastic international panel for you, an amazing range of speakers to talk about the situation in Sudan, to talk about our solidarity, and to talk about what we can do to help those struggling now in Sudan, the solidarity that we can show as part of our collective international struggle. We're going to take our 4 speakers at the beginning. They're going to speak for 10 minutes each, and we're going to be quite tight on the time because at the end of that, we want to leave half of the meeting for some really good questions and discussion. This meeting is in a webinar format, so if you've got a question that you would like to ask, if you look down at the bottom of your screen, you'll see a box marked Q&A. Click on that and you'll be able to put your questions into the Q&A section. We'll then take a selection of those, as many as we can manage in the time, and put them to our panel to respond. So as you're listening, do have a think of questions you'd like to ask and pop them into the Q&A. As I say, this webinar this evening, organised jointly by Liberation, Stop the War, Morning Star, all 3 organisations that you can connect with and get involved with. So we'll be sharing some links in the chat as well to get more involved in Stop the War and Liberation, and to make sure that you're getting your daily copy of the Morning Star. But without further ado, I'm very pleased to welcome our first speaker, Comrade Rashid Sid Ahmed Elsheikh from the Sudanese Communist Party. Comrade Rashid is a translator, poet with an MA in Cultural Policy Management. He's a long-time and experienced and respected cadre of the Sudanese Communist Party, a well-known campaigner for peace and progress in Britain for many years when he lived in London, and former political secretary of the Sudanese Communist Party in the UK and Ireland, former Secretary of Solidarity and Foreign Affairs of the SCP in UK and Ireland. We've had a little bit of trouble with the link, but I'm hoping, Comrade Rashid, that you'll be able to join us now. Okay, my apologies. It seems that our link may have dropped once again. We're going to keep trying with this because it's really important to hear that voice from Sudan about the situation and about what can be done. But while that link is down, rather than wait, I'm going to move straight to our second speaker for this evening, Comrade Marc Botenga, MEP for the Belgian Workers' Party. Marc Botenga is a Belgian MEP in office since 2019, a member of the Belgian Workers' Party and a left group in the European Parliament. During the recent pandemic, he spearheaded a massive campaign in the European Parliament that aimed to force the waiving of patents by big pharmaceutical corporations, which have been monopolising the production and marketing of the COVID-19 vaccine, whilst hundreds of people in Africa, Asia and Latin America were being left unprotected and vulnerable to the rampaging virus. Marc, we're really pleased that you can join us for this evening's webinar. You've got 10 minutes for your contribution. Over to you.
Hello, can you hear me all right?
Yes, we can.
Just checking you're hearing me. Okay, I'm coming through the way you want me to come through. All right, first of all, thank you so much for the invitation. I mean, I think it's a great initiative, and I'm very curious as well to listen to and to hear from our comrades. The situation, and I apologize for my voice. I've had a very intense week and my voice has unfortunately given in. So yeah, I'm speaking to you from the European Parliament. We're currently in plenary session in Strasbourg. And I want to maybe start by highlighting a few topics, looking at it from obviously the European side. Now, I think it's very clear that if you look at a global perspective, there's been a United States strategy that has shown a certain complicity between, on the one hand, armed forces in Sudan, and on the other hand, the United States. And I'm very curious to look at the analysis that's going to come from our comrades there. But the European Union, has generally been more trying to hide its links to the military. But like between 2017 and the summer of 2019, so at that moment, it was very clearly the Bashar regime in charge. There was a series of programs and projects which were pushed in the framework of what we call immigration policy, but which is basically immigration control. And so the idea is that there would be training, European Union would be training Sudanese police. As you know, there's also in Khartoum a regional operational center, which served as, how would I say, a center to exchange information about migration with the intelligence services of basically 9 countries in the Horn of Africa. Now, the center has been suspended in June 2019 in order to move to Kenya, Nairobi now. Now, all of these projects, as I've been saying, are framed or organized in the framework of so-called BMM, which is Better Migration Management Programs. They're implemented generally in a coalition of large countries, being France, Germany, Italy, the Netherlands, and the United Kingdom at the time, before it left the European Union, and implemented also through public companies. So, for example, the training of Sudanese police forces has seen the involvement of French public companies like Civipol. To speak for a moment from my own country, I'm Belgium. Our former government, 2017, has invited, and there was a huge polemic on this, a delegation of Sudanese security forces to Brussels, helping this way with the identification of Sudanese refugees, which were considered illegal by the Belgian government because they were traveling, or they were supposed to be traveling to the United Kingdom. And so there was a witness reports afterwards of them, of these refugees being tortured afterwards. And the Belgian refugee entity, let's say what we call the Commissariat for Refugees, was convicted afterwards by the European Court for Human Rights because of violation of human rights in this cooperation with Sudanese security forces. So I think this is one big dimension of EU policy towards Sudan specifically, and towards the region really, where the main focus has been on limiting migration or migrants or refugees coming to the European Union and or Belgium. A second pillar, of course, that I want to address is more economic policy. Now, I don't need to tell you, but I want to tell it anyway. That IMF programs, I think there have been about 11 for Sudan, have had a very negative, a very terrible impact on the country, not just in Sudan, by the way, but throughout Africa. One of the objectives has always been to liberalize the very important agricultural sector of the country, and to reframe it or to reorient it towards export. Now, because of these, let's call it this bad advice and these so-called development programs, Sudan has also been pushed, but this is decades ago, into debt, which then offered the opportunity for the IMF to, and once again with full European support, of course, to impose so-called austerity. And this has always, and I want to express my admiration for the struggle of the Sudanese people There have been different revolts and mobilizations, and I'm sure we'll hear about this later, already in the 70s, the 80s, but also very recently, in order to just have access to just have the right to very basic goods, be it bread, be it gasoline, be it other basic goods. Also recently, I think was it 2021, if I'm not wrong, when Prime Minister Hamdok wanted to come with a new kind of a IMF program that was preceded by stopping subsidies. There was a lot of resistance, and I think this resistance, this social mobilization, is really important, and it's going to be even more important. And I'm going to come back to that after my third point. Of course, the situation and the conflict in Darfur are very much linked to desertification. So between what was it, the last 4 decades, or the 4 decades, let's say, between the 50s and the 90s, there have been at least 3 important periods of drought, and the impact on agriculture, the impact on nomads, is obviously massive of this, which from the European Union side out would require, and the European Union is not doing that, just to make that clear, would require a much more radical climate policy, would require much more investment into infrastructure, public investment in infrastructure, and require a real contribution from those that have benefited, European multinationals, European big companies that have benefited from these policies that have harmed, that were imperialist policies, that have harmed Sudan and the Sudanese people and working classes so badly. Now, why do I want to insist on this? Because actually, currently, there's 2 big pushes for a new EU partnership with Africa in general. One of them I've insisted on a lot, which is migration. So it's like, let's do everything not to accept migrants from Africa. The other one is a push for resources, for raw materials, for critical raw materials, and so on. And so the European Union and European countries in general are very open about this, that the new objective is, in order to get the green transition going, to get to guarantee energy independence and so on, to get more from Africa. Now, they are claiming that it will be done in a different way than before, saying, yes, before, I heard a German member of the European Parliament tell me recently that, before we plundered Africa, we stole their resources, but that was only because we didn't have a regulatory framework. So we didn't know we were doing anything wrong. Of course, no need to say that that's complete and utter nonsense. And this imperialist policy of the European Union at the different levels towards Africa is going to continue. And it might, and I'm thinking it's going to intensify in the upcoming years with different kinds of excuses: migration, security, and raw materials. And obviously these 3 are not unlinked. So for us, the battle inside Europe, inside the European Union, will very much be to first unmask and uncover the false rhetoric that has been being pushed by the European Union and by the European establishment, saying, no, but we're coming back to Africa, but this time it's really to help the African people, to help African governments to gain control. We all know what IMF programs did, not just in Sudan, but throughout Africa. We all know that similar programs, because obviously the European Union is now coming with programs to stimulate the business investment. We know what the rhetoric means. We know what's hiding behind this rhetoric. And we know that the only alternative to this is working class struggle and people struggle. This goes, of course, and this is what our comrades will speak about in Sudan, but it's also true in the European Union. We face really today a fundamental challenge to be able to say, we want to break with this model of neo-colonial and neoliberal plunder of Africa, not just economically, but also the political schemes of divide and conquer, divide and rule, that haven't gone away. I mean, they haven't gone away. You can see them very clearly in different parts of Africa. You can see them in the west of Africa. You can see them in Central Africa, and you can see them obviously in the region we're talking about tonight. So this will be a strategic challenge for the left and for communist and left-wing parties throughout Europe to be able to denounce this new neo-colonial push. Some call it green colonialism, climate colonialism, whatever it might be. It will be clear for us that we need to develop solidarity movements between the workers of Europe and the peoples of Africa in order to change society and not allow this new neo-colonial push to go on. So I'll keep it at that because apparently I've already outspoken my 10 minutes, and I apologize for that. Looking very much forward. Once again, thanks a lot for the invitation, and looking very much forward to the exchange.
Thank you very much, Marc, for your contribution and for highlighting the importance of opposing neo-colonialism and the importance of keeping up that solidarity struggle. Absolutely essential for us, and we really appreciate your contribution today and look forward to further discussion as our questions come in. If you do have questions you would like to put to our panel, please click on the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen and put your questions in there, and when we've heard from all of our panel, I'll be putting the questions to them on your behalf, so please do put them in there. I would also encourage people, we'll be putting links in the chat. If you're not already signed up to Liberation, please do sign up to their mailing list to make sure you hear about future activities, future events, and can get involved in what is an absolutely crucial campaign. So thanks very much. Our next speaker, I'm very pleased to introduce, is Comrade Amira Osman. Amira is a prominent activist in the Sudanese democratic and progressive movement. She's a noted and long-term campaigner for peace, human and democratic rights, and in particular for women's rights in Sudan. Comrade Amira has been actively campaigning and lobbying for democratic and progressive change in Sudan for over 30 years and has ably represented the Sudanese democratic and progressive movement abroad. Over the past 15 years, Comrade Amira has been part of the coordinating group of women activists in Britain that has organised International Women's Day events in London that have been very successfully and well received on behalf of the coordinating committee of Communist parties in Britain. Comrade Amira, you are very welcome, and the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, and thank you to Liberation for allowing me to be part of this fantastic event and to speak and to be part of distinctive speakers. So I've got 10 minutes. I'm going to move quickly about a few things. And to begin with, as we know, the war in Sudan, which started on 15th of April, unlike previous war, the previous war started in the peripheries, like Darfur, Southern Sudan. This one started in Khartoum and then spread to different parts of Sudan, including Darfur and Kordofan. It's a war to control people resources, including fertile lands, gold and oil, etc. It's also to control people and to erode them from their rights to build a country they want under the famous slogan, freedom, peace, and justice. It's a bloody way to counter the revolution and the revolutionary actions, including street protests, and the democratic change people have long been campaigning to achieve. And in fact, both foreign parties have used different sorts of weapons, including heavy weapons, rockets, heavy artillery, aircrafts, and anti-aircraft missiles. This is going to lead me to explain what's going on the ground. The current situation, high numbers of civilian casualties, thousands of people have been killed. Estimations suggest 2,000 people are killed in Khartoum, 8,000 people in Darfur, but as with any war, it's very difficult to give accurate number of the dead because simply there is no proper system to count the dead. But what I can say here is the numbers keep rising as we speak. The streets in Khartoum and Western Sudan regions, unfortunately, are littered with dead bodies. The war led to destruction of people, assets, and livelihoods, including houses, farms, shops, factories, destruction of essential infrastructure, including bridges, hospital, airport, medical supply, warehouses, and this is violation to Geneva Convention. In fact, both warring parties have violated Geneva Convention, in particular Article 55, Article 56. Those articles talks about protection of civilians and their hospitals and different objects. There is also disturbance to trade and supply chain that led to shortage of food supply in some areas, as well as shortage in water. And when there is shortage in water, people try to use unclean water, and that may have that is in itself is a risk of health, and it's going to lead to waterborne diseases, including diarrhea and cholera. And in fact, there is some cases of diarrhea in many areas. There is absence of health care when hospitals are out of services. Medical staff are unable to reach hospital due to insecurity. Some were caught up in the fight while on their way to hospital and killed. In fact, medical team and patient had to be evacuated from some hospital and health clinics, which is too bad for them. Hospitals have become military target and scene of heavy bombardment. Examples: hospitals in Darfur, Nial Hospital, Al Jinan hospitals, hospital in North Khartoum, in Omdurman. And there's also a power cut, which leads to damage of medical supplies, stone, and fridges. So in all, we are getting into a health disaster. The situation led to, or it created, a humanitarian emergency. Aid agencies are struggling to reach vulnerable people. And by vulnerable people, I would like to talk about the displaced, orphan, children, elderly, patients in hospital with life-threatening illnesses, women in particular, those who were victims of gender-based violence. In terms of internally displaced people, and before this war, Sudan hosted 3.7 million internally displaced people. By now, the number could, I think it is 4 million or 5 million internally displaced people. We also have tens of thousands of Sudanese people fleeing home, seeking safety outside Sudan. They are crossing borders to Egypt, South Sudan, Ethiopia, Chad. And these countries are dealing with their own problems. They have insecurity, they have hunger, and having more refugees, will add more burden on them. Unfortunately, Egypt has introduced new border control, asking people for more documents and enter visa. And that would take weeks or even months to get this kind of document. And unfortunately, many people have to wait longer in border town. Could be months, could be weeks, days, we don't know. But within this group of people, we have people with medical needs, including pregnant women and children. And people are living in the urban street, makeshift shelters, and there is lack of sufficient food and water, and of course, medications. Western countries are closing their border. They have no plan to host refugees from war to Sudan. And on the other hand, countries like South Sudan and Chad, these two countries are the two least developed countries in the world, according to a report by UN. However, they are opening their border to Sudanese people seeking safety. Now I'm going to talk about orphans, and this is a very sad story. We have Maigom Orphan in Khartoum. I'm sure some of you have heard about it. It's an orphan run by the state. It was host to about 400 orphans located in an area which was affected by the heavy fighting. Unfortunately, about 70 orphans have died from starvation and dehydration. Because of the fighting, people were not able to help them. Later, about 300 were rescued by humanitarian workers and taken to a safe place outside Khartoum. It's a very sad story. You don't find such kind of a story on the international media or the front pages. They are just forgotten. And generally, children, those who have witnessed the fighting, are more likely to develop mental health issues. Also, bombardment or local immunization has clearly deprived children from access to proper immunization this will have short and long-term impact on their health. Gender-based violence, as in any war, it has escalated in Sudan, including rape. And of course, this happened in many wars. In Rwanda, it happened in Rwanda, in Bosnia, in Darfur 20 years ago. It's happening right now in Sudan and Darfur. And rape, as we know, is used as a weapon against women, as a war tactic. It used to humiliate women, their families, and their community. And it is, again, it's difficult to know the number because simply many women, I guess, don't want to report that because there is no proper mechanism to report it. And because of the stigma, because of the norms, they don't report it. And we will never know the exact number. This is the situation. Despite that, there are some local initiatives, despite insecurity and lack of resources, and in the absence of a state institution, including the police, civil defense, and near the collapse of health sector, local people, they have tried to rely on their own social network, on their own social capital, solidarity, indigenous knowledge, and to provide support to each other. Example, resistance committees, that is neighborhood committees, youth citizen observers network. They have tried to monitor the humanitarian and security situation at the local level. They help to evacuate foreign nationals. And in fact, some of them, they contact embassy, tells them, okay, if you need us to help you evacuate your personnel, we are happy to do that. And they did. They did some kind of mutual aid, helping each other, food, medicine. They opened homes to displaced people. And they also mapping safe locations and sharing information. And this is very important because people, there is no official body to tell people about what's going on the ground in terms of security, in terms of fighting. And local people, they will share information. If there is a safe area, they will circulate that, look, that market is safe, you can go and do shopping. If there is a bombardment somewhere fighting, they will tell each other, don't go there, there is a fighting. So they help each other with the limited resources they are having. Now, what do you want now? Urgent actions are very important. We need immediate ceasefire, emergency aid, food, medical supply, humanitarian corridors to allow safe transit of aid and safe passages for people, pressure on the warring part to set up these humanitarian corridors and guarantee safe passages of humanitarian aid, ensure to respect the laws of war. Most urgently, to initiate a sufficient mechanism to protect the vulnerable civilian population. I will stop here. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, comrade, and in particular for highlighting the human impact of what's hughtning in Sudan, the impact that it has on real people in the country, the damage that it does to people. I think hugely important to hear that voice. So we've had our first two panelists. We're just waiting for Jeremy Corbyn to arrive, who's on his way. I believe they got voting today in the House of Parliament. So we're just waiting for him to come and see if we can re-establish our connection with Comrade Rashid. But while we're waiting, we thought we would open up to our first round of questions. So if you would have something that you would like to ask of one, other, or both of our panelists, then please do put those in the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. Just click on that, type your question in, and we'll be able to put it. So to begin with, I'm going to put the first question that's been asked to both panelists. So the UK has announced just earlier today that it has imposed new sanctions on businesses which are fueling the devastating conflict in Sudan by providing funding and arms to military groups. According to this announcement, these sanctions will ensure that any assets held in the UK by these conglomerates and companies will be frozen. What the panel members make of this development, and how does it sit with the UK's widely alleged complicity with the Sudanese military rulers and with the suspension of the process of transition to civilian rule and democracy? Could panel members expand on Britain's role in appeasing Sudanese dictatorship and the suspension of the popular uprising in pursuit of their own material interests within Sudan. So quite a long question here, but in particular about the role of Britain. What role will sanctions play now, but also how do they sit with Britain's complicity with what's happened so far? I'll go to you in the same order that you came in earlier. So to you first, Marc.
To be honest, I mean, I think it's more of a question for Amira, Osman, and maybe also for Jeremy later. The matter, I think the matter has been with the European Union generally. The sanctions have been the sanction policy of the European Union has very often hit people on the ground. Rather than indeed helping, it has really not done, not achieved what officially it should achieve. And very often these sanctions have been instrumental, not so much in improving the situation on the ground, but rather in, how would I say, in furthering geopolitical interests of the European Union. So I think this is really, really important when we look at these sanctions. Regarding specific sanctions on companies, for example, that are involved. I mean, I'm not going to go into the British example because I'm not exactly sure how these sanctions were adopted. What I think is important is that sanctioning one or two individuals, one or two companies, or whatever, does not change the fundamental foreign policy. Does not change the fundamental issues of support, does not change the fundamental economic dictates that have been imposed, does not change the cooperation with security forces, does not change the absolutely inhumane migration policy. So, it's also, aside from the sanctions and their real effects, their side effects, their negative passes in certain countries, I do think it's important to say, there's an entire cohesive and coherent, policy out there, which has not been supporting the struggle of the Sudanese people, which has, on the contrary, really pushed back on genuine popular mobilization. So, of course, I think we need to support any positive measure, any step in the right direction, but I would not want to whitewash the responsibility of the West in what is going on in Sudan and what has been going on in Sudan. So in this sense, we're generally skeptical of sanctions when they hit the local population. I think this is important. On the other hand, I'm not going to support European policy. I'm not going to allow European policy to be whitewashed in exchange for a few measures. So whatever measures going in the right direction, we will support, but we will not, how would I say, close our eyes or be silent about what is going on currently on migration policy, on economic dictates, and on this new push for neocolonialism towards Africa. So that's, let's say, it's a more general comment because I don't want to go into the British policy, British sanctions, which I've not followed, so I'm not going to say anything specific, but towards the European Union and inside the European Union, that's very much a battle we're waging.
Thanks very much, Marc. And I think really important comments there on the role of sanctions, but also the need not to whitewash that history. Amira, over to you. The British position on sanctions and then their historical role, your views.
Right. Okay. Now, when people know before, they knew that there's some kind of trade relationship between warring parties and the UK. People know that. We know Alginet, we know some military companies have relationship, and people have campaigned for those kind of things because they are fueling, they are allowing those warring parties to accumulate money and to buy weapons and to use those weapons against their own people. Now there are 6 companies which was sanctioned by the UK. How many companies are still not sanctioned? We want to know the exact numbers, what's going on. Any step to disturb money or funding coming to those generals to fuel the war, I think it's accepted. However, we want to know how many companies which are not sanctioned, and also there's a question why this haven't been done before. Because if this one has been done before, it could have saved lives of millions of people and livelihoods of millions of people. It came very late because the money used before from the trading, it was used against people of Sudan since 2019. So it's a step which came very late, but again, as I said, any step to disturb trading and to allow warring parties to get funding and to accumulate money to buy weapons is good for the people of Sudan. But we have to wait and see what will come next.
Thank you. Thank you very much for that, Amira. So that was the first question from our audience today. We've a significant number of questions now gathering in the chat, but if you've got something that you would like to ask our panel, then please do add your questions into the chat. Please do also take this opportunity, and we'll post the links in the chat. We mentioned earlier the importance of signing up to and supporting Liberation, but this evening's meeting is a joint meeting jointly organised by Liberation alongside the Stop the War Coalition and the Morning Star. Please do make sure you use the links there to sign up to support the Stop the War Coalition. Now more than ever, your support is needed by the peace and anti-war movement in this country. And of course, do sign up to receive a daily copy of the Morning Star. If you don't get it, speak to your local news agents or subscribe online. The voice of the left and the trade union movement for peace and socialism in Britain. So please do make sure you sign up there using the links in the chat. Now, I am really pleased that we have managed to get Comrade Rashid back onto the call. Apologies for the difficulty we had with the connection previously, but we know how difficult it is to establish that link, and welcome back. So for those of you who didn't hear the introduction earlier, Comrade Rashid Elsheikh is a translator, poet and cultural figure who's a well-known campaigner for peace and progress and a respected cadre and member of the Sudanese Communist Party. So Comrade Rashid, you have 10 minutes to establish your positions and speak to us today. You're very, very welcome, and I'll hand over to you now, Comrade.
Thank you very much, Comrade. Do you hear me clearly now?
We can hear you nice and clearly now, thank you.
Fantastic. I'm sorry, it is the war. Actually, the line breaks very, very often, even in the normal telephone conversations. I will start by cordially send my regards to the organizers of this event, Liberation and Morning Star and Stop the War. We have on the receiving end of their support many, many, many times. Thank you very much, comrades. And I will also salute the Sudanese people in their very difficult time and the strive under these heinous situations of war. But we trust and we believe that the Sudanese people, resilient and steadfast, have been through many difficult situations and prevailed. In the past 55 years, the Sudanese civil, peaceful organizations and revolutionaries managed to topple 3 military dictatorships in October 64 and March, April 85 and December 18. And we believe that our resilience will continue and we'll see the end to this war and sail to the other shore to build the dream Sudan. I will concentrate in a few points, as I have only 10 minutes. First, we welcome any effort to stop the mayhem and the destruction happening in Sudan. But we are mindful that all the efforts to materialize any sort of stoppage of this war or ceasefire has got its own vested interests and its own agenda. And we believe as well that not everything glittering is actually real gold. But in this dire situation, stopping the war is a priority, and humanitarian assistance to the Sudanese people is a priority. But we need to open our minds and to let those supporters and those people who really care about the Sudanese people and their revolution, that many of these efforts are just a carbon copy of what happened in Naifasha, which resulted at the end of the independence of the third of the Sudan and creating the Republic of South Sudan. Sudan's geopolitics is very important in this equation. It is in the middle of Africa, and it is surrounded by many countries and states who are sitting on a ticking bomb. So everything happening in Sudan could spill over. So the skirmish to help Sudan is actually being pushed by this angle. But actually, we cannot deprive all these efforts from goodwill for the Sudanese people. But we need to be very accumulated experiences showed us and showed many other countries in the world that in politics there is no charity. There is a tit for tat, or if you are not strong enough, you're going to be robbed, like what happened in many examples. I don't want to bore you with mentioning it. We, with the democratic, progressive, revolutionary forces in Sudan, we are working and hoping to resolve this war or this conflict without the need of any military interventions from anywhere. Because also from experience, any foot soldiers on ground, they carry with them omens, and the price to get rid of them is going to be as dear as the price being paid during this futile, illicit war happening in Sudan between the two generals and those behind them, their surrogates. I would like to touch on the latest activities in regard of Sudan question. Few days ago, meeting by the quartet of IGAD met in Addis Ababa and published a communique, which is in general and at the face of it is not bad. Some people will say it is good because it is one of the best outcomes in letter, in words. But it is so ambiguous, and some vague statements it makes me and others have like a déjà vu of what happened in Naifasha. The communique mentioned that the two warring parties need to sit down and resolve this conflict by dialogue and political process. All the other initiatives said the same. The only thing that came out of this communique, which is actually not included in the written document, it is being uttered by the President of Kenya and the Prime Minister of Ethiopia, which is mentioning that they are considering the involvement of the military sort of organizations in Africa, like the ISAF, which is the East African support or standby forces, and the AFRICOM. And there is a hint that because the United Nations was attending as well, and Volker creates some sort of hinting here and there that if the warring parties did not resolve to dialogues, more strong interventions will happen, which is alluding to Article 7. And all these three alternatives, which are not being mentioned by name, but hinted to, are a presence of foreign military forces in Sudan. The communique also hinted on no-fly zones or something like that, which is put in a very vague wordings. So we welcome the intention, we welcome the declaration, because now we own it as the people, and we can task them to make it happen on ground. I'm not very optimistic about the outcome of these initiatives, but it is a step rather than succumbing to these bombardments and these atrocities committed by both warring facts. There is another thing as well, is the mentioning of involvement of the civil forces in Sudan to be part of these negotiations of peace and seizure of war, killing. The major body of the Sudanese people who actually achieve this change are not represented in the delegates there. Another thing, when you talk about civil political forces without exception, and this is hinted to as well, that means this includes the political parties who were part of the deposed regime, either by splinter groups from its mainstream, or some others who really agree with them in the general look towards governance and towards political practice in Sudan. All these parties are being rejected by the Sudanese people and being exempt from any political involvement by the abrogated constitutional accord signed between the military and the political forces 2019. So this is like a mixed bag of contradicting sort of elements. And we, the living forces of the revolution in Sudan, will not affiliate to that endeavor, because it is a repetition of the same deposed ideology and deposed regime of the Muslim Brotherhood and those Islamic fundamentalists in Sudan. One other thing to mention is now we're having more than one platform and initiative. We have, this is the quartet of the IGAD. Tomorrow, there is a platform in Egypt. Few days ago, there was an effort in Geneva, and another one in Lebanon, Beirut. All these efforts say the same thing, but we fear that this is part of a ploy. It is a part of a ploy as we see it, because it is going to prolong the fighting on ground and the suffering of the Sudanese people, while we are trying to like unify these platforms in one platform to address urgently the crisis and the calamity in Sudan. The chances of it unified is doubtful, because the groups behind each one of these platforms has got vested interest in Sudan, but in a contradicting trajectories. Some of them believe that the rapid support force is going to serve their interests there and help them achieve it. And some others stick behind the military, who are actually working on behalf of the deposed Islamic regime from behind the scene. While we think of how to unify this, people are paying by blood, tears, and sweat in Sudan. So the news of what is happening in Sudan is all over there. And anyone who wants to dig deep, informations are available all over the world. Our question here, and what we actually ask and call for, is what can the democratic, progressive organizations or pressure groups in the Western countries can do to facilitate real substantial help from the governments, and to exert pressures on both sides to stop this nihilistic war and to help the Sudanese people achieve their slogans, who paid dearly to raise it and fought under its banners, and is still willing and able to do that: peace, freedom, and justice. So from this platform, actually, I would like to send a message to every and all democratic forces around the world. what is happening in Sudan is exceptional. It is abhorrent. It is something never seen before, neither in Sudan and I doubt anywhere else. The military warplanes dump its bombs in the dwellings of the civilians, killing and injuring hundreds just for the sake of showing the people that they're doing something. There is no military in the world will bomb civilian dwellings in any case. They do this because the rapid support forces are controlling the roads, controlling or actually using the people as human shields. So we have had enough of lip services, and really we don't need any co-performers, hurly-burly lip services. We need actual things to happen on ground, humanitarian assistance, pressures on those generals, and sanctions to them. Actually, I've just read this evening news that the United Kingdom is actually doing something about some of these companies who are supporting and financing the two warring factors. This is the type of thing that we are looking for. Of course, the solidarity will help us to stick to our trajectory and to stick to the path that we are treading on, which is, as I said, freedom, peace, and justice. And I thank you very much for this opportunity to say whatever needed to be said here, and ask for this not to be the last. We need to see so many other organizations putting the Sudanese issue on the top of this idea. Thank you very much, comrade. Thank you for availing this platform.
Thank you very much, Comrade Rashid, and full solidarity with you and the people of Sudan for freedom, for peace, and for social justice. I think a really, really important contribution there to hear that voice of what the Sudanese people are calling for. And you mentioned at the end there the question of the UK's announcement earlier today around imposing new sanctions on businesses who've been fueling this conflict. I asked the other panel members earlier, before we were able to reestablish the connection, how they felt that sat with Britain's long-term role in appeasing the Sudanese dictatorship and the suspension of the popular uprising in 2018 and 19. So we put that to panel members earlier, and I'd be really interested in your views. But just one other question I want to ask in and add in around that, as well as the question of sanctions now and what this says about Britain's role. Looking historically, 78% of arms sold by Britain to Sudan in the last 10 years was sold in the months immediately following the coup in October 2021. In the same recent period, aid for projects has been cut to a fraction of what it was. The British government's position is clear. It doesn't want to see a civilian government of the masses. How best can the people of Britain challenge our government's support for military and reactionary forces and strengthen the cause of peace and democratic elections? So your views on the sanctions, but also what can we do here to challenge our government's support for military and reactionary forces in Sudan? And then that latter question I'll put to the rest of the panel as well. But first of all, Rashid.
Thank you very much, comrade. Yes, the involvement of the British government since my fashion. Actually, the special envoy there was so arrogant, not even to listen to any other voice apart from the voice that is pushing the South Sudan to vote in the referendum for independence and secession. And actually, I spoke to him once, and he's so arrogant, not even listening or even giving consideration or even being diplomatic in his answers. This is one of the mentality, and I think it is a remnants of the colonial attitude, maybe. I don't know, but the involvement of the British government in support of the Sudan, I think it is very negligible. But they were supporting any dictatorial regime that is going to facilitate their vested interests. Moreover, Chatham House was being like an advisory body, like a think tank, who actually smuggled many of the ideas that actually landed us into this the road of Calvary we are treading on now. So what we need from the British people, and we know that the majority are not agreeing with some of the despotic sort of policies, and I've been there when erroneous stance taken by the British government. So I know the British people are willing to see a peaceful world, but the civil organizations, the NGOs, writing petitions, standing with the Sudanese people, demonstrating and writing in all organs of newspapers, whatever, to expose the I don't want to use harsh words, but to expose the not genuine stand by the declared positions and by the nice, sweet lip services in regards of supporting the real people who are endeavoring to achieve a real democratic state or a system which actually may stand against their vested interest there. Sudan geopolitics is really, really very, very critical. It is now like a ping-pong table. Players are China, Turkey, Russia, United States of America, and some Arab small emirates loaded with money, and they want to like control countries in Africa, united by weak and corrupt leaders, not only in Sudan, but all over the area.
Thank you, thank you. I'll move over next then to put the same question to Comrade Amira in terms of how best can we, the people of Britain, challenge our government support for military and reactionary forces and strengthen the cause of peace and democratic elections. Amira?
Thank you very much. In fact, what we are doing now is part of it. This is part of it because we want the British people, the people who love peace, the people who love democracy, the people who show solidarity with people in Sudan to campaign and lobby for peace. The people can lobby their MPs. They can coordinate with the Sudanese people in the diaspora. And in fact, there are some practical things happening on the ground We do some kind of coordination with women's organizations here in Britain, with the youth group here in Britain. We contact MPs because this is yes, we know this is a British government, but we also want people who don't know much about Sudan, about the history of Sudan, about the history of the UK and Sudan, about the political process in Sudan, to know about it, because having the right information, knowing about Sudan, the country, and what people want would help us to gain support from different people. And we have started that with people in Britain. Some of them, they signed a statement issued by people in diaspora. We explain the situation in Sudan and what the Sudanese people want, not the government, what the real people in Sudan want. People signed the statement, they campaign for that, and they lobbied for that. And I think that's the work which we want to do with people here in Britain to support Sudan, but first of all, to know what's going on in Sudan, and then after that, they will support it. And I'm sure by the end of the day, we are going to get much support, much help from people here in Britain.
Thank you very much, Comrade. I think really important response there. Moving on to Marc, I have a slightly different question here. A question raised by one of our audience. We see the hands of the European Union as well as other foreign powers in the current situation in Sudan. It's not just Britain that where there's been involvement and many things point to involvement and support of military forces in Sudan. How can we expect or go about securing the deeper involvement of the European Parliament in the anti-war movement and in solidarity with the people of Sudan, given this situation?
Yes, first of all, my apologies, but I do need to leave. Unfortunately, it's a plenary session of the European Parliament, and that requires an excessive amount of meetings and debates, but okay, that's what we're here for. Regarding the involvement of the European Parliament on Sudan, there was a resolution that was voted last month, so in June, on Sudan, which condemned the fighting between the Sudanese military and the Rapid Support Force, deploring the violations of human rights and demanding, of course, that all hostilities be ceased immediately in order to be able to negotiate a peace agreement. Now, to be honest, what was positive about the resolution was that it asked for unrestricted access for humanitarian aid. I think that's important, to be able to get humanitarian corridors and basic public services. What I do think, though, is that if we want more, if we want genuine engagement, because a resolution from the European Parliament, and we can criticize it partially, and we can applaud certain parts of it, but in any case, a resolution from the European Parliament is just a resolution. It doesn't have any specific binding impact. It doesn't have any. No one has to listen to it. So what I do think is important, that we need to push for it more. And this needs to come from the people. Like, it's not going to come from like a spontaneous combustion within Parliament. It's going to be the solidarity movement. It's going to be events like the one of tonight, but it's going to be the mobilization of the Sudanese people. And it's going to be also awareness raising on the situation in Sudan amongst the general public in Europe. Because I mentioned the condemnation the Belgian government, the previous Belgian government, got for how it treated and how it dealt with Sudanese refugees here in Belgium on their way to the United Kingdom. Now, this is something that requires awareness raising as well on what the situation in Sudan is and why it is so urgent that our governments, and I'm not going to say do the right thing, but at least stop doing the wrong thing. I think this would be a very good first step. You know, of course, if there are a number of measures, and some of them have been discussed, that the European Union can and should support or implement, we can push for them. But I think it's in a broader picture, it is very important that they stop doing the wrong thing. That they stop, in the name of, be it migration policy, in the name of economic or geopolitical interests, supporting the wrong people or supporting, the repression or the oppression of the Sudanese people. But this will require a balance of power. It's not something that, it's not just an amendment to be put to the European Parliament. It is, it depends on people's struggle. And so very happy indeed to continue this conversation and to see as well with the Solidarity Movement what we can achieve potentially with colleagues in order to make sure that we get a push for human rights, we get a push for peace and a just peace, of course, and we address all the issues that the different comrades tonight have brought to the table, and which have really, to be honest, I've learned a lot. So I think it's really it's really wonderful to be able to have this conversation and then to see, okay, how can we fight inside Europe against imperialism and the neocolonialism that's present, and that's, as I said in my first intervention, risks to be deepened. Thank you very much for this in any case. So I'll have to apologize, but once again, very happy to keep the conversation going.
Thank you very much for joining us today, comrade, and good luck with your meetings that you have to leave for today. But we really appreciate your input, and it's an ongoing dialogue that obviously will continue in other spaces, in other venues, as part of our growing solidarity with the people of Sudan. So thank you very much for joining us today. I'll move on then to questions to the rest of the panel. We've got more questions from our audience. In particular, Amira, a question about the role played by women in the movement, the part played by women, and especially young women, in the public space in the struggle against military dictatorship in 2019 and against the military since, has become legendary. What happened to the women's movement since the war began in April, and how do you see it rising and moving forward in the struggle for equality and justice?
Women's movement is still alive, is still working, but of course the activists women showed during the revolution is completely different from the activists during war. There is a war now, but women are still there. Of course, as I just mentioned, war has disturbed everything, people's lives, the very things women trying to do is to make sure that they are safe, their families are safe, their neighborhood are safe. However, they also involved in different activities. I would call different type of activists during war. They are involved with the resistance committees, neighborhood committees, to provide support to people who trapped on their homes and try, as I just mentioned, to share information with people who are still there on safety, on food availability of food, and those kind of stuff. So they are doing this type of work with youth, with the neighborhood committees. They are also trying to help women who are victims of gender-based violence, because there is kidnapping of girls and women in some neighborhoods, as I just mentioned, gender-based violence. So they are trying to help victims of those kind of violence during war. With the limited resources, they tried to provide what they could to make sure that those girls are safe, to make sure their recovery is smooth, and to provide some kind of, to find medication for them, because as I mentioned, there is no hospital. If that kind of abuse happens, those girls and women, they need medical help, medical support. Those women, young girls, are trying to help these women by providing such kind of things. Also, psychological support is very important in this during this time. They are trying to help. They also lobbying for peace and try to form a strong front coalition against war. They are talking using the means available to them despite insecurity. And in fact, they managed to build a coalition of anti-war movement, and that is type of the things they are doing. Even those who were able to leave Khartoum and live in different cities, they were involved when there was some kind of protest on the street. They were there leading the protest as used to be, but that's not happening. Of course, there is no protest in Khartoum. People can't go to street and protest because of insecurity, but it happened in different area. Those who left Sudan become refugees, especially in Sudan-Chad border. Women were there, they will try to help refugees, to help women who try to cross Sudan to different areas. So to summarize, it is, yes, is a different type of activism, unlike before, but women are still doing what they can to do during this difficult time in Sudan.
Thank you. And that's really positive to hear the strength of the women's movement that's still there, different, of course, at a very difficult time, but that role continues, and obviously we express our solidarity with their movement, which, as the questioner says, became legendary. A question now to both panelists, and I'll put to Rashid first. Well, a couple of linked questions actually from our audience. There were reports indicating that the military conflict between the Sudanese army and the Rapid Support Force is in some ways a proxy war involving some neighboring countries such as Egypt and others, and also notorious mercenary forces such as Wagner. Could the speakers comment on the accuracy of such reports and explain the dimensions of these? But a second question that's linked, another of our audience members has asked, to what extent is the war in Sudan a result of international Eurocentric policy making? And to what extent is it due to Sudan's own government's actions? I don't know if the two of you could comment on that balance, the international dimensions versus the national dimensions in this conflict. Comrade Rashid, first of all.
Thank you very much, Comrade. Yes, I believe both parties are involved in what is happening in Sudan. The international intervention in Sudan's affairs, and especially the European Union, by supporting and financing the rapid force to police the borders of Sudan and Libya and Egypt, to stop what is called illegal immigrations. And this is millions. Italy has acknowledged that. The others were trying to evade that, but they said this is not real support. It is just paying for the expenses of them to play this role. This is one of the interventions. The other intervention is the regional one. Some of the Arab countries has amassed millions of hectares of Emirates, and they do this by bribing and by giving some facilities and some sort of sweeteners and lubrications for the regime in Sudan, the previous deposed one, and it is carried on after the military junta took control of the state after the revolution. There is also the new Cold War between China and the United States of America over the Red Sea, which I can say this is going to be one of the most important water passages in the few coming decades. The Silk Road, or the Silk Path of China, they wanted to build a railway from the Red Sea shores in Port Sudan in Sudan to Adari in the Republic of Chad, which is going to be like a means of exporting the goods and importing the raw materials from the West African states. Turkey has got some claims because they were the previous colonial power, They want to control an old port in Sudan called Sawakin and to build it. Russia wore ships visits for Sudan very frequently, alarming the Americans. The Egyptians wanted to amass some sort of the land on top of what they did in an area there called Halayb and Shalatin. They wanted some of the, of course, the United States of America built the largest embassy and center of espionage in Africa, in Sudan. So, and Russia, of course, are involved by smuggling Sudan's gold and having good relations with the Rapid Force leader. And Wagner presents in Sudan and the neighboring country. So the international intervention there is quite present for everybody to see. The opposition and the internal factors who might have resulted in this war, yes, there is some elements. Because after the revolution, we left by deliberate acts from the junta not to dismantle the deep state of the previous Muslim Brothers deposed regime. And they have the dreams and the illusions of coming back to power and control. Of course, there is some regional states, regional important factors in the neighboring country want them to be targeted because they have vested of some of the civil powers in Sudan, mishandling of managing the state during the two epochs of Prime Minister Hamdok. They didn't do what is being expected of them. So they created some vacuum, and nature is against vacuum. The vacuum is filled by the counter-revolutionaries and the deep state. But to some extent, the international intervention is more potent than the lack of competence from the civil state functionaries in Sudan, if I can call them that. So both premises are right, not equal, but both of them have got a hand in what transpired after the 15th of, or actually after the 25th of October, the first coup d'etat by Rapid Force and the military, when they were the same boat, and of course resulted in the 15th of April, when the war broke and still raging and raging in Sudan.
Thank you, comrade. Amira, over to you. The questions on the balance between the national.
Thank you. As I just mentioned, for me, for many people, it's a war led by the two generals to control resources, including gold and oil, because rebel support forces, they rely on gold to fuel the war. The army rely on oil to fuel the war. Is also to counter the revolution action in Sudan. That is what is the war about. But again, the war has maybe a proxy dimension. As Rashid mentioned, there are different actors, international actors, which have interest in Sudan. It's not like a proxy war like the proxy war we have seen during the Cold era. No, it's not like that. But again, international actors, they have interest. Russia is having interest in Sudan because they want a military base by the Red Sea. And the Americans will not allow that. United Arab Emirates have interest because they do get gold from the rebel support forces. Those people smuggled gold to United Arab Emirates. Also, Egypt has interest in the Nile. They want to allow a democratic role in Sudan. They want a weak regime so they can do what they want in Sudan, exploit its resources, and keep the Nile agreement as it is, not to be changed, because that Nile agreement benefits Egypt a lot. Also, Saudi Arabia, as you know, that rebel support forces, they used to send soldiers to fight in Yemen and to get money for that. So that is part of it, part of the funding which comes to rebel support forces. Now Turkey is trying to intervene to do something in Sudan as well. And as I said, all those different actors are interested in Sudan, its resources, to exploit its resources and to keep it just like a paralyzed country and developed country. Wagner, yes, they do have commercial interest, commercial ties with rebel support forces. I'm not sure about the recent development, but yes, they did have some kind of. So if you could see, there are different actors here and there. Coming to Europe, Eurocentric government, well, Europe have interest as well, of course, in Sudan. And Rashid just mentioned the Khartoum agreement is like to keep refugees from crossing, from coming to Europe, which is against human rights by all means. And this fits well with our dictatorship, regime in Sudan. It's stopped now, it's not operating. I don't know if they abolish it or is still on hold, but that kind of things you get from Europe, part of it. I mean, sometimes some kind of exploitation. But we are relying, as I just mentioned, on people who love democracy, who love peace. We rely on them, we work with them, we coordinate with them, and we want to change this policy, at least the European policy, because we are here in Europe, and we will not stop until this policy is changed. And I think it starts changing by what we hear today from the British government in relation to the sanction. We will coordinate with democratic forces in Europe for a democratic Sudan and to stop Europe from doing the opposite. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I guess up to us to keep that pressure on to ensure that that policy does change and that shift happens. We're coming right towards the end of the meeting now. And in a moment, I'm going to bring our panelists back to just say a short final message to everyone who's here. Before I do that, I want to thank all of the panelists, all of the audience, and to Liberation, Stop the War and Morning Star from putting on this meeting. I also want to thank Jeremy Corbyn, who, although he's not been able to speak because he's tied up with other business, has been here on the call the whole time.
No, come on quickly if you want.
You're here. Thank you so much, Jeremy. Really appreciate it. And you giving your time to what is obviously a crucially important cause. Jeremy, you're really, really welcome. People will know Jeremy, needs no introduction as not former leader of the opposition, but also, more importantly, if I might argue, a consistent campaigner for decades and decades for peace, social justice, and for internationalism. Jeremy, over to you.
Thanks, Gawain. I will be very brief because I've been in various meetings. Thanks for the step outside this call park where I'm in at the moment, so I hope there's not too much interference. First of all, the liberation of this with the support of Stop the War Coalition is really excellent, because it is that analysis and voice from the people of Sudan that is completely missing from the mainstream media's analysis of what is happening in Sudan. This superficial and lazy reporting that's going on nearly all of our channels and all of our newspapers just presents it as a war between two generals who've fallen out over something and they just need to be brought together. And that is, I suspect, very, very far off the truth. I think the issues that have to be faced is, first of all, of course, the need for a ceasefire and an end to the killing and the destruction. But secondly, that is not, of course, peace. That is not, of course, democracy. That is not, of course, the voice of the Sudanese people. That is what has to be heard, so that voice can be heard and that voice can decide on the future of the Sudan. But the next issue is, of course, the geopolitical questions that have been raised by the last speakers, and they are the most important ones. We're living in an era where there's a new Cold War developing very fast, where the United States under Biden is trying to reassert its leadership on a global basis. Personally, I'm not sure any country should be seen as the global leader. I think surely what we need is a period of global peace and therefore global understanding. Now, this issue of global leadership then, of course, leads on to competition about resources. Sudan has vast amounts of resources of its own, which have always been eyed up by the imperial powers, always been exploited by the imperial powers. And quite honestly, they might have different names, different titles, and so on. But global corporations trying to exploit the natural resources of African countries isn't exactly new. It's something that is going on apace and aided and abetted by the economic models pushed onto African countries by the World Bank and by the International Monetary Fund. And so that understanding is a very important one. And that understanding then leads us to a point of solidarity with the people of Sudan, trying to assert their own ownership and control of their natural resources, their own ownership and control of their own economy, and then start to examine the question of debt levels that are huge amongst most African countries, encouraged by the world's financial institutions, because of course massive levels of debt also comes with it massive levels of control over the economy and over the future of all African countries. And so I think that we need tonight, and I've been listening as far as I can, because I said I've been in a number of events, to the analyses and the questions being put, and I'm really interested in them because they, to me, point to a whole issue of global solidarity between the trade union labor movements of Europe, North America, with the people of Africa, Asia, and Latin America. That surely is what we need to build. The war in Ukraine is not helpful in any way. It's not helpful to the people of Ukraine. It's not helpful to the people of Russia. And whilst I disagree with Russia's invasion, absolutely, what I do want to see is a ceasefire and some kind of peace process to bring an end to that. This war is enabling all those that want to create a new Cold War on this earth to be stronger as a result of it, and all Western countries to spend more and more on arms and defense rather than the social needs of the people and ensure global peace. And so to me, this call this evening has been absolutely fascinating, very informative, very interesting. And this mustn't be the only time we have that discussion. And I look forward to continuing it in the future. I won't disappear. What I'll do is turn off my microphone. Wait, thank you. Friends.
Thanks, Jeremy, for that message of support, solidarity, and Thank you for taking the time to be part of this meeting on this vital issue, and I couldn't agree with you more that the need now is for us to strengthen the forces of peace, the forces of solidarity, and that actually Liberation, Stop the War, coming together with the support of the Morning Star today to put this meeting on is a really crucial step. So thank you very much for that and for your long-term support for this and many other international causes. Before I bring Rashid and Amira back in for any final comments from then, I just want to share one more message. It's not a question this time, but from one of our audience members, a message of solidarity. It's from someone who lives in Liverpool, who says she recently met a Sudanese woman who's had to flee her country with her daughter, leaving her husband behind, and who worries for what's happening to her husband and other relatives at home. And she says, this audience member says, I extend a welcome to her. She's in a city with a warm heart, and I hope that she finds a welcome here. I look forward to developing a relationship with her and her daughter, and this session has helped me to understand more about the situation in Sudan, which will help. I know this is not a question, but a comment which I hope says, welcome to Sudanese people here now in Liverpool because of the war. We support you. And I just think really important to share these solidarity messages that are coming from people in this meeting today with the people of Sudan, both those struggling in Sudan, but also those who've had to make their way to this country, who we obviously welcome in support and solidarity, hoping for peace, social justice, freedom in Sudan. So I'll now bring back our panelists to close the meeting for their final contribution. So first of all, Comrade Amira.
Thank you very much. And the last thing, I would like to thank those who campaigned with us, those who loved peace, solidarity. We would like to thank them very much. We would like to say that we appreciate what you have done for us. And I would like to say that we can work together to make the world a better place for people in Sudan, for people in Ukraine, for people in Palestine, for people here, for people everywhere. Let us keep up our solidarity and our work for a peaceful world. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Amira. And for the final word, over to Rashid.
Thank you very much, comrade, and would like to say again, thank you for Liberation and for Stop War Coalition and the Morning Star. And actually, I was very happy to hear the stance that Jeremy Corbyn has just stated, which is I mean, not new for a very sort of vintaged warrior in the solidarity sphere and the work for peace and humanitarian sort of justice. Let us keep this type of interactions. And for those comrades living in UK, unfortunately, I'm in the middle of the throng here, but please keep the flag flying and keep the banners of peace, freedom, and justice high up in the sky. And long live solidarity, long live the resilient Sudanese people. Thank you very much, comrades.
Solidarity, and thank you all for joining this evening's meeting. On behalf of Liberation, Stop the War, and Morning Star, I close this evening's meeting and thank all of our panelists, all of our attendees for their contributions. We stand together in solidarity, and we will indeed raise high the banners of peace, of freedom, of solidarity and justice.
Thank you.